JJ the CPA here. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to my podcast, Captain's Log. Who's the captain? Well, that's for me to say because, I'm feeling like I'm getting to that age in my early 50s where, I've kind of been around the block a couple of times, probably like a lot of you. And I feel as though as we're moving forward and as we move forward with the tax industry, that I'm going to be like, I'm the older guy, I'm like the elder statesman. I was over in the UK and I was visiting with a wonderful, what am I trying to say, a consultant to the Chartered of Accountants out in the UK area. That's Amanda C. Watts. I've known her a long time, of course, just overseas, but we had an opportunity to get together for lunch with her and her husband Matthew. Amanda and I did, and we had a great time and it was a lot of fun. But one of the things Amanda said is, this is Amanda C. Watts, she's like, I think you need to say that you're heading into this era of your career and with all of your experience, and so she's like, you're the godfather of CPAs. And I was like, maybe over in the States, referring to yourself as the godfather may have a different connotation, and being a CPA and, appearance and in fact and all that good stuff. So anyways, it kind of grew on me. And then I was like, well, hey, Captain America, right? America's CPA, if you've been around my channel and all the support you've provided over the years, you know that America's CPA, Captain America, all that good stuff has kind of come into play, like right there. So I was like, okay, well, how about this? I don't think that's too bold to say I'm one of the captains. A lot of captains, right? So I'm the captain of the CPAs, right? So there's lots of teams, and there's a head coach, and there's a GM, and there's an offense coordinator and a defense coordinator, but then there's a captain, right? One that's out on the field. And I thought, well, that probably applies. I'm still in the trenches, right? Out on the field. So what we're going to be talking about here in Captain's Log, my weekly podcast, is really the things about running a tax practice. So this is really directed towards those that have their own tax practice. But if you're a small business owner, I'm sure you would pick up a number of things as well. But this would be for CPAs and EAs, enrolled agents, and tax professionals, whether full-time, part-time, thinking about it. Maybe CPAs thinking about getting in the industry, or EAs. And we can go and get tax updates, but then those things kind of expire and get stale and old, and then they change. And I've got continuing professional education that you can check out related to that. JJ the CPA, CPE. And sure, that was a plug, right? But all I'm saying is like, well, if you're wanting tax update, go to my monthly tax update for CPE. We know we can't get that for continuing education on YouTube, and I can give it, provide it for both CPAs and enrolled agents approved with the IRS. All right, enough on that. What are we going to be covering, though? I want to give you just some ideas of things I believe we'll be covering as we roll this out, as we move forward, is talking about kind of practice management, but not just there. And it's practice management that probably you've not thought of it maybe the way that I'm going to present it to you, because the way I'm going to present it to you is not about how you keep working with the lions and tigers and the bears. It's going to be about, well, pick one. And it's going to be about making, I think, your life better. It's going to take into account my story and some things that I've had to go through. But more, so here's what I did about it. Here's something you might consider. So this is going to be from your side. This isn't going to be per se, so if you do this and you do this, you're going to make more money. This is going to be like, well, if you do this, you're going to be happier, and it would probably lead to you making more money. So in terms of tax updates, that's not what I'm going to cover here. In terms of kind of your normal practice management stuff that if you showed up at one of those seminars you would expect it to be about, it's not going to be that. So my point in saying that is I'm trying to bring an angle that's from your perspective, thinking about you, thinking about you, not even as a tax preparer of a small business, but just as a person. So what would some of those be? Well, I've got a practice that isn't perfect, and it's not the end all be all, but the way that I practice, I've narrowed this stuff down based on these life experiences and been in the tax business and only in the tax business for 31 years. I've had my own practice for 27, only do taxes. Of course, bookkeeping, used to do payroll, don't. And, sent that all over to my favorite payroll company. You all know who that is. And then as it relates to doing some of the bookkeeping, well, we have some of those clients that have been around forever. But, I've gotten up to 13 people. We had, several thousand tax returns to do. And, I think of the 13 people, let's see, we would have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 CPAs in that head count. And then did some downsizing, had a health event, had to do further downsizing. And now I'm in a mode of, I've got my base of clients, and my grandfather's a CPA. And so I'm kind of following his retirement plan, which is you don't need to retire. Your clients start selling their businesses and, getting simpler and simpler. And then really with new business and with new growth, now starting succession. And my son's joined the practice. He's still on his way. But anyways, you can check out my podcast that Coop and I have that is kind of our steps that we're going through, but that's not really practice management either. So JJ, I've already been listening to you now for 6.5 minutes. It sure would be nice if you could give me some information that I could take that I could then make my life better, so to speak. I'm getting to it, but this is episode 1. With that, here's some of the things that I'll be covering, right? How I focus my entire year towards an efficient tax season, and April 15th really being the end of my year in terms of working with the client, because when we hit May 1, we now really want to work on the current year, the current information that we're in now. Also looking at how to actually better service your clients, but with less touch. And minorly using some technology, but we're having some great success that I wouldn't have expected in terms of how we're getting information to our clients that is not a newsletter, so to speak. Also, avoiding scope creep, right? We have our favorite clients or those that we all of a sudden look up and we're like, wow, we're actually advising on this and we're doing this. Well, how do we avoid some of that? And kind of just looking at my notes, pricing and how I've come up with some of those things. And that one, I have a real kind of calculation, like, okay, of my rent, how many hours are there in a work week? So, I own my own building, so I pay my own self rent. But if I take that rent and I divide it by 2,080 hours, right, in a year, well, it's like, well, then that's my cost per hour. And then taking into account my other overhead items, etc., and bringing it out and say, this is what it costs me per hour just to have the doors open, and then working in payroll after that to then help with really ensuring I've got some good profitability. Also talking about just offshore, I've explored those options. I haven't taken advantage of that. I know some CPAs and EAs that are and having some success with that, but just kind of talking about it. And then talking about what client do you really want and how to define that and how I went through the process of defining that. And then looking at, well, what services do I want to provide? And that's the key word. I want to provide, not, well, this is what my client wants, right? So if my client came to me and they said, hey, boy, I just love the way that you come in and advise me on taxes. And so it seems like you would really be efficient. I'm looking at my notes here. It seems like you would really be efficient at chopping wood at my house and making me a fire. Would you do that for me, JJ? Listen, I'm going to pay you whatever your hourly rate is, but man, just to see you in my backyard, to have the comfort of you and who I trust, it's an axe and it's around my family. And so would you come over once a week? Would you chop some wood for me? And then before you head out, would you go ahead and make a fire? And oh, by the way, we do need a fire probably started before we all wake up. So if that could get done, let's just call it, how about every Wednesday I need that done, and I need that fire pretty much roaring by maybe 6:30 a.m. And you would go, well, that is ludicrous. But how many of us, me included, all of a sudden we look up and we're like, why am I sitting here chopping wood and making a fire, and especially on a Wednesday and this early? Like, I've got some other things to do, right? And if you think about it, how inefficient is that? But for us in our service industry, sometimes we get caught up in that. Also, just talking about and looking at something that, is somewhat popular, but it's, taking your time and dividing it out. And I'm looking at my notes here, and bottom line is what's urgent but important, what's important but not urgent, what's not important but urgent, which is usually other people, what's not urgent and not important. And basically, I've put together my practice where I'm not doing urgent, important work. Never during the year am I doing urgent, important work. What I'm doing throughout the year is urgent, okay? Nope. It's non-urgent, meaning the reason it's non-urgent is that I'm getting it done early. It's important, but it's not urgent. And the only reason is you're right. If you now pick up a set of 12 bank statements on April 1st to get a return done for the prior year, you're now in something that's important, that's urgent. You go, oh, well, they're going to owe a lot of tax. By golly, I better tell them. They're going to have penalties. Where with my clients, it's like, well, no, by this time, we're going to have those things done. And so we're never going to be in an urgent situation. And then delegating the things that are urgent but not important. What is that? Well, should we order 10 reams of paper now, or how about 20 reams? But putting in, not just leaving it up to a trusted somebody, but like putting in some procedures related to that. And then not dealing with the not urgent and the not important. What would that be? Well, I own my own building, and pay myself rent to the entity that owns the building. But, out front, we've got a flower bed. Okay, well, that's not urgent and that's not important, but it is something that needs to be taken care of. So what did I do? Well, you set up with a company that I don't have to think about it again. They come routinely. We'll get an invoice, it gets paid, they do what it is, and I don't have to sit around and think about that kind of stuff, right? But how many of us, right, especially in the beginning, right, because this would have been me in the beginning, what are we doing? Are you doing this, right? You're like, you know what? I'll just come over. On Sunday morning, I'll weed the front beds, and I can get the flowers. Now, some are like, boy, that's therapeutic. I love it. I get my hands in the dirt and I love it, right? Okay, yeah, that's one thing, but are you really doing it or things like that? Because you're like, well, I'm not going to pay somebody. Well, I'm not going to pay somebody to take out the trash. Well, I can do that. Or, well, that staff over there, they can do that, right? And with that, though, what we do is we keep stuff on our plate. So talking about some of those things. But here's the one I'm going to leave you with, because I want to try and that's called the Eisenhower Matrix. I'm looking at a seminar that I present, and it's the Eisenhower Matrix. So that's one of the things I use, and I didn't come up with it. But let me leave you with this. And then hopefully you'll tune in as we move forward, and maybe check out my other podcasts. But what I want you to think through right now is this. Here's the concept that maybe will show you I'm going to put a few things on its head and looking at you, but maybe making you feel a little uncomfortable when you're considering what it is that I'm getting ready to tell you. And the only reason it'd be uncomfortable, maybe, is you haven't thought about it this way. And the reason you might actually be uncomfortable is that it might actually convince you that you need to make a change in probably most every tax practices area of I need to make a change. And what is that? Too much work, too many hours, overtime, right? So here's what it is. So if you're a CPA, this is going to resonate with you easily and early. If you're an EA, you've probably gone through some seminars related to this. And of course, we know under Circular 230, there's some language similar, but it's very, very more specific and more drawn out of requirements related to what I'm getting ready to tell you. And you're right, I'm trying to build up suspense. Now, if you're a tax professional, been doing it a long time, that's great. So over time, right, this is something you want to do a good job at. So for all of us in the tax business, what do we want to do, right? We want to do a good job, right? We want to do a proper tax preparation, right? That the appropriate amount of tax is being assessed, right? No more, no less, not aggressive, not unaggressive, not, like we want to do a good job, right? So if we're trying to put something together that is, being balanced here on this and this, well, we want to make sure that if we're now collecting a fee for doing services to come up with something that's not something that does this over time or falls apart or shows up like this, right? We want to do a good job. So what's really that? Okay, it's called due care. Let me put a lot of terms to it. Due care. So if we're exercising due care, which as CPAs we're required, EAs, you're required, but I'm just telling you with CPAs, it's just more, just pounded into us on this due care. So due care would be this, right? Somebody comes to you and they say, hey, listen, I want you to do a tax return for this small bank, and they have this and they have that, and you need to do this form, and you do that form. And I'm trying to come up with something that maybe a lot of us are like, yeah, I wouldn't know how to do that, right? And those that have, awesome. But I'm just saying, like, what is that? Like Q sub S Corp, this, and this, okay? Maybe you're like, well, I've done 48 of those just last year. Awesome. I've never had an opportunity to even present them. I don't even know that I've ever seen the return or attended a seminar. This is a rare thing, right? But if somebody came to you and they said, I want you to get that done, right? I'm hoping you would treat it the same as, basically somebody going to their heart surgeon and saying, hey, listen, I trust you, I know you, but I've got to get some brain surgery and I really just want you to perform it. So you're my heart doctor, I know you, I trust you, you've been working with me forever. I know you're the best, you're awesome, I'm going to pay whatever you want to pay, but I've got to get some brain surgery and I need you to do it. Heart doc. Is the heart doc ever going to do that? Are they even going to scrub in? No. Why? It'd be the same if someone came to you and they said, hey, real quick, do you have a drill in your garage? And you go, well, yeah. Like, great. I trust you, with my taxes, you do such a great job. Could I stop by? I've got a cavity back here. And since you have a drill and you have a steady hand, I'm sure, with all the work you're doing, I've got a cavity. Do you mind drilling it out, right? You would go, why would I do that? But when somebody walks up and they're like, hey, what you do is Q sub, S Corp, this and that, you're like, well, maybe, this, and that's okay. But what I'm telling you is, after about 2 years in practice, when back then it's like, well, yeah, maybe I could figure that out, But what I'm saying is, if you look at something and you go, well, I'm just not qualified. Does that mean I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm doing? No. Even if they're like, well, how many of you heard this? Well, I've never even heard of a CPA. I've never even heard of an EA or a tax professional that couldn't do that. I'm like, well, how many have you heard of and who are you talking to? I digress. But most likely you would go, you know what? I'm not going to do that because I'm not qualified, right? I'm not qualified. Not going to be able to chop your wood. Not going to be able to do brain surgery. Certainly not going to drill out your cavity. The same as, yeah, I'm not going to get into that. Now, sometimes the tax professionals are like, well, I could. And maybe that's the kind of practice you have, and that's great. But I bet a heart surgeon could go, well, I could watch me some YouTube videos, and I bet I could talk to some friends, and I bet I could stitch that up in a way that I could get in there in your brain, and I probably wouldn't mess it up too bad. Right? No. It all comes back to when we don't take on a job, we don't take on a project, even if it's like, listen, I'll do everything else you want me to do, but I can't do that. I'm in several of those over the years. It's called due care. That's why. It's not, I'm a dumb preparer, so I don't know how to do it. I'm not qualified, even though technically you wouldn't be. But what is that really called? It's called due care. Now, why am I telling you this? Because these things right here make sense to us. And the seminars where I've been, this is the part that really makes people kind of stop in their tracks and go, wow, I've not ever thought of it that way. Because here we go, I'm closing in 1 minute. Closing out in 1 minute. Having too much work, working too many hours, having too many tax returns, too many clients, not enough staff, inexperienced staff. If that's what you feel that you're looking at your practice, and even though we go, well, but I'm helping people and I can't turn these people away, and this is their mom and they've been with me a long time and all this stuff. But at some point you'd have to look at that and go, am I practicing due care by just taking it on and overwhelming myself? Here's my last statement. If a heart surgeon said, hey, you know, the first 100 days of the year, we do as many heart surgeries as we possibly can. We'll stay up all night, 7 days a week, bring it. If we need, we bring in some help. Some people that'll come and help us. Well, they're not super experienced, but we'll figure it out. And we do as many as we can, 7 days a week. And we're going to bring on as many as you can. You just wait. As soon as we're done, we'll bring. You would never go to a heart surgeon. That's in essence what they would be telling you, and you then wanting them to do your heart surgery. So practice due care. And now, does that give you a different level of confidence in now looking at your practice and going, maybe I need to make some changes? Well, hey, thanks for tuning in. I hope that you check out my other podcasts. Come and check out other Captain's Log podcasts as we move forward. And then thanks for tuning in. I'd love it if you'd subscribe. And then don't you ever forget, you've never met a CPA quite like me. You have a great one.